All right, so some of you might be asking, why are we learning about these squares and cube roots? What kind of situations do they allow us to solve problems about? And you're going to learn that today and kind of continue that over the next 3 days. So you've already learned about perimeter and area, and there are two ways to talk about sort of measurement values of a shape. And perimeter and area are used for two-dimensional shapes. And then we also have things called surface area and volume, which are used for three-dimensional shapes. So one of the things that you're going to see here that I'm going to point out is the units. So when we're talking about perimeter, you should know this from elementary school. So perimeter is the distance around a shape. So if I'm talking about the perimeter of this shape here, well, this side length is 3, this side length is 3, this side length is 3, and this side length is 3. And in all of the problems that we're going to be doing, we're going to be dealing with squares and cubes, which are all based on shapes that have equal sides all around. So anytime I want to find the perimeter of a square, I can just take the side length, which is 3, or whatever the side length is, and I can multiply it by what? Yep, 4. So anytime I know the side length for the perimeter, I multiply it by 4. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is the same as 3 times 4. So the perimeter here would be 12 units. Not square units, not cube units, just units, because it is just telling you how long this one-dimensional line is. Just a line right there. And that line is 1, 2, so on and so forth. So it's 12 units all by itself. So if I want to find the perimeter, it's 4 multiplied by whatever the side length is. So that's perimeter. So area, we notice, is units squared. And that's going to end up being important because when you have units squared, that squared is going to tell you what kind of root you're going to need to take later on. So let's say we've got the number of square units enclosed by the figure. That's the area. So let's say this is 3, this is 3, this is still 3, this is still 3. Well, if I wanted to find the area of this figure, I take the side length, which in this case is 3, and I multiply it by what's basically length times width. So that's the side length multiplied by the side length again. So 3 times 3. So that's the side times the side, or that's the same thing as taking the side length and squaring it. 3 times 3 is the same thing as 3 squared, so the area here is going to be 9. And again, taking that side length and squaring it only works if you are dealing with a square. If it's a rectangle, then you have to multiply the length and the width because they're different numbers. So surface area is the one that tends to mess people up. So the surface area is the sum, or the result of an addition problem, of the area of each face. Well, in a cube, there are always going to be 6 faces. So top, bottom, front, back, left, right. So there's always 6 faces on a cube. So each one of the faces there is made up of a square. So the surface area is asking you to find the area of one square and then multiply it by 6. So if I'm looking here, this cube is 3 by 3 by 3. Well, if I want to find the area of one square, that's length times width, or side squared. So the area of one square there would be 3 times 3, which is 9. So that means that each one of these squares here has an area of 9. So we've got 9 there, 9 there, 9 there. We've got 9 on the bottom. We've actually have 9 6 times. So I know that each one of these has an area, each one of the 6 has an area of 9 because the side length is 3. So therefore 9 times the 6 different sides is going to give you 54 units squared. And again, remember that's because there are 6 different squares that all have the same area of 9. So then we're going to go to, so basically what we did there was we found the area of one square. So that was the side squared, and then we multiplied it by 6. Last thing here is we have a cube. So let's say this is 3, this is 3. Length is, what other piece do we need? Length times height. All right, so we got length times width times height. So when you find the volume, you do length times width times height. So in this case, it's 3 times 3 times 3. So that's actually 3 to the third power. Well, 3 to the third power is 27, and here we are reporting in units cubed. And again, that's going to be very important to us. All right, so these next questions, pretty simple. They're asking us to find the area and the perimeter of each square. So you know if this is a square, which it tells you it is, each of these is 4. So the perimeter is 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, which happens to be 4 times 4. So the perimeter here is 16 centimeters. Now to find the area, I do side times side, or 4 squared, and 4 squared is actually also 16, and this is 16 centimeters squared. Now the perimeter and area are very rarely equal, so don't think that they're equal just because that worked that time. That only worked in this particular problem. So in this next question here, we have a situation where we've got 5 on each side. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. I don't know why the mouse is staying control. So what we're going to do now is for the perimeter here, we are going to add up 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, which is the same as 5 times 4. So that gives me 20. Jesus. That gives me 20 centimeters. Nope, measuring in millimeters. All right, well now I need the area, so that's length times width, or 5 times 5, which is 5 squared. So the area here is 25 millimeters squared. All right, for this last one here, we have 2 inches, so that's going to give us 2 inches here. So if I want to find the, and 2 here, and 2 here, if I want to find the perimeter, it's 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, which gives us 8, or 2 multiplied by 4, because there's 4 sides, so our perimeter would be 8 inches. If I want to find the area, that's 2 times 2, or 2 squared, so the area there would be 4 inches squared. All right, so basically now it's saying that we're taking these squares, we're turning them into cubes, and I want to know what the surface area and the volume would be. So basically, if this is a 4 by 4 square, it becomes a 4 by 4 by 4 cube. If this was a 5 by 5 square, it becomes a 5 by 5 by 5 cube, so on and so forth. So in this first question here, let's start with volume because that's the easiest one. We know that volume is always equal to the length times the width times the height. And so if I look in this first question here, that's going to be 4 times 4 times 4. So in this case, that's going to give me 4 times 4 times 4. So that's 4 to the power of 3. So the volume here is going to be 64, and those are centimeters, and volume is measured in units cubed. And that's because it takes 3 numbers, 1, 2, 3, to create the volume. The surface area here is a little bit different. There are 6 surfaces on this figure, so you need to know what is the area of each surface. Well, each surface here is a square, so that front surface there has an area that I can find by multiplying the length and the width. Well, the length and the width of that square are 4 times 4, so that means the area of one of the squares is 16. Well, we know that there's not just one square that makes up a cube. There's actually 6 squares. So now you need to take that 16, which is one of the 6 faces, and you need to multiply it by 6 to represent all 6 faces. And when you do 16 multiplied by 6, you get that the surface area here is going to be 96 centimeters squared. because area is always given to us in units squared. So volume here, we know that this one is a 5 by 5 by 5. So if I want to find the volume, length times width times height gives us 5 to the power of 3. Well, 5 to the power of 3 gives us 125. And it doesn't give us a unit, so we say units cubed. Now let's say I want to find the surface area. Well, if I want to find the surface area, I need to find the area of one of the 6 surfaces. So this surface right here is a square that's made up by 5 times 5. So that one surface has its area of 25 units squared. Well, there's not just one surface here. There are how many surfaces? That's right, 6. So I do 25, that's one face, times 6, because there are 6 different faces. And when I do 25 times 6, I end up with 150 units squared. Remember, area is always squared. Then finally, we move on to this last one here, where we are dealing with a cube that has side lengths of 2. So that's going to be 2 times 2 times 2. So that's going to be length times width times height. So that's 2 times 2 times 2, which is the same as 2 to the third power. So for our volume there, we have 8 units cubed. Now for the surface area, again, this is where you have to find the area of one surface to start with. So this surface is a square. The square is a 2 by 2 square. So this surface has an area of 4 units squared. Well, there's not just one surface with an area of 4 units squared. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 4 times 6 is going to give me 24 units squared as the surface area. So that right there honestly should be a review of things from 6th and 7th grade. We're talking about if you know things about a square, how do you find its perimeter, how do you find its area? If you know things about a cube, how do you find its volume and its surface area? So your homework tonight, what you're going to do, your quizzes tonight is only about that right there. So I don't want you to be freaked out as we go into this next section. At the end, you're going to see a quizzes code. That homework or that quizzes is only about what you see up top there. You want to read it carefully so you know what it's asking you about. But again, that's only about that. What we are going to do is we're going to continue along and we're going to talk about what if you need to work in reverse, because that is where we are going the next couple days. So the first thing that we're going to do right here is we are going to look at this question that says, what if you know the perimeter? And so again, in these last ones, we've started with the side length. Each time they've given you the side length and you found some more information about it. Well, now at this point, I am going to give you some other information. And when you don't know the side length, and I'm gonna write this down just so you understand how important it is. When you don't know the side length, the most important thing is to find the side length of the square. Find the side length of the figure, which in this case is always a square. So these are just some basic steps. So we're not, again, this is not what your homework's on. This is actually, we're going to use this information tomorrow during the Zoom class to do some questions together, and then you'll have homework on that. But this right here is just to sort of prepare your mind for what we're going to be doing. So in this question right here, we know the perimeter. Well, it says if you know the perimeter of a square, there's something you can do to find the length of a side. Well, I know that the perimeter is made by adding together these 1, 2, 3, 4 equal sides, so I could always do 4 times the side length. So if I know the perimeter, if I want to find one of the sides, what I can do is divide by 4. So it tells me that the perimeter is 20. Well, if I do 20 divided by 4, that gives me 5. So 5, 5, 5, and 5. Well, 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 20. So that checks out. In these questions, I always recommend that you draw the figure and make sure that it checks out. So go ahead and do these next two by yourself real quick. Figure out what each side length there would be. So pause while you do that. And then again, I'm just going to keep going, but you should pause while you do that and then come back and check. All right, so I'm given the perimeter. When I'm given the perimeter, I divide by 4 to get the side length. So 84 divided by 4 gave me 21. I still want to check it to make sure that makes sense. So if I put 21 on each side and I add that up, sure enough, it does give me a perimeter of 84. Then I go here and I take my 120 because if it gives me the perimeter, I divide by 4. So I get a side length of 30. I'm going to draw that out, make sure it makes sense. 30, 30, 30, and 30. So when I add those together, I do get 120. So that's what you do if you know the perimeter. Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting. We've got, in this case, they give us the area. Well, if we think about this right now, we know that to get the area of the square, you have to do some number times another number. Well, if it's a square, it means that whatever number I have here has to be the same number as I have here. Well, if I start thinking, I happen to know that the only number that I can multiply by itself to get 36 happens to be 6. Well, if you think about that, there is a relationship that you should know between an exponent of 2 and the number 6. Well, some of us recognize that 6 squared happens to be 36. Well, some of us also recognize that the square root of 36 is 6. So if you know the area of the square, it gives you inches squared. You know the area of the square. You take the square root to find the length of a side. So if I here have 36, I can take the square root of 36, which is my area. I get 6. That gives me a side length of 6. Well, 6 times 6 is 36, so that makes sense for that to be the area. So again, pause and go ahead and find the side length if the area is 49 and if the area is 225. All right, so here, if I know that the area here is 49 inches squared, again, that squared should indicate to you that at some point you're going to need to take the square root. So it's just, I got a flat shape here and it wants to know the side length of the square. So I take the square root of 49 and I get 7. So that's going to give me 7 inches. When I check that, I throw 7 on each side of the square. I do know that 7 times 7 gives me that 49. Here I've got 225, got an area of 225 yards squared. That squared tells me that I'm going to need to take the square root at some point. Since I'm already just looking at the flat square here, I take the square root of 225, and that gives me 15. So here I know that my area would be 15 yards. Well, that makes sense because 15 times 15 gives you 225. So again, what we're doing here is we're working backward. Here, we're working forward. They give you the side length. You work forward to find the information. That's what your homework is about. This working backward is preparation for tomorrow. So we got 2 more things where we're working backward here. We're going to start with surface area, comes next. And this is the one that tends to confuse people because people see this square here and they think about it and they immediately want to start taking the square root. Not yet, because we remember that the surface area is actually the sum of 6 different surfaces. So what I have to do first is I have to take that surface area, which is this total of these 6 surfaces, and I have to split it back up because I only want to pay attention to one surface. So what I want to do right now is if I know the surface area of the cube, the first thing that I want to do is divide by 6. because if I divide by 6, that's going to allow me to figure out, well, what was the area of just one of those 6 faces? So if I take 150 and I divide it by 6 here, well, that tells me that this one face here has an area of 25. Well, it's not just 25, it's 25 units squared. So I've got 25 units squared right here. Well, this right here is just a flat square, right? So I've taken it from this 3D shape to just this flat square here that has an area of 25 units squared. Well, now, if you're talking about just one flat square, we know because this is made up of 6 flat squares, we already split it back into just one of them. Well, if I take the square root of 25 here, I end up getting that the side length has to be 5. So first you divide by 6, then you take the square root to find the area. So here, this would end up being a 5 by 5 by 5. Because if you find the area of one square, 5 times 5 gives you 25 centimeters squared. Then if you multiply that by 6, then you end up with your 150. So let's continue here. So it's not just the area, it's the surface area, and that's going to be the surface area. So if I, right now, I know that 294 centimeters squared is the combined area of 6 squares. So I want to take this and I want to split it up so that I am only looking at one of those 6 squares. So I've got 294 divided by 6. Well, that leaves me with one square only, and it's a square that has an area of 49 centimeters squared. Well, now I have a square with the area of 49, so I take the square root of 49, and that tells me that each one of those was 7. So then if you want to recreate that figure to make sure that that makes sense here, you'd have 7 by 7 by 7. Well, this front face here would be 7 by 7. It would be 49. And 49 for one face times the 6 faces would give you 294. So now we're going to look at this last one. We have a surface area of 276 millimeters squared. So remember, surface area is saying that I have 6 squares together that have that area. So if I take that total surface area and I divide it by 6, split it up into its 6 pieces, this is going to give me that each one of the squares has an area of 121 millimeters squared. Well, if I've got 121 as the area, I have squared, so I take the square root of 121 and I get 11. So each one of my side lengths there would be 11. Surface area is the most tricky one, but if you really do think about that as how it just gives you the total area of 6 squares, you divide it by 6, then you're just looking at this again. You're looking at how do you find the side length of a square when you know the area, because the surface area of a cube is just the area of 6 squares added together. It's flat. It's talking about the flat space, not the volume, the space inside. Now the volume here is talking about the space inside. And all of a sudden you see a different exponent. So right now we're seeing that exponent of 3. Well, that exponent of 2 kept telling us that we needed to take a specific kind of root, and that was the square root. So we're probably not taking the square root anymore. In fact, we know of a kind of root that uses an exponent of 3, and that is our cube root. So what I'm going to do when I know the volume of a cube is you take the cube root to find the length of a side. So if I start with the volume here, I've got a volume of 343. Well, if I take the cubed root of 343, I get 7. So this would be 7 by 7 by 7, and 7 times 7 times 7 is 343. Again, they don't give us the area, they give us the volume. So that would be what the volume equals and what the volume equals here. Well, now I'm going to take the cubed root of 512. Well, the cubed root of 512 is 8. So it's going to be 8 centimeters, because if I had a cube that was 8 by 8 by 8, 8 times 8 times 8 does in fact give me 512. Last one here, that should be a C. I'm given the volume of 729 centimeters cubed. Anytime you see a measurement given to you in cubed, it reminds you to take the cubed root, and the cubed root of 729 is 9 centimeters. So side lengths are always just given in units: centimeters, centimeters, millimeters, inches. Areas are given to you in units squared: centimeters squared, millimeters squared, inches squared, and then volumes are given to you in units cubed. So I just want to do a brief recap of this to kind of set your mind right for tomorrow. So if you are given the perimeter, you just divide by 4. You notice there's no exponent anywhere in here, so you don't take any square roots. You don't take any cube roots because perimeter doesn't contain a squared or a cubed. That's a one-step process. So if you have the perimeter and you want to know the side length, that's one step. If you know the area of a square, you want to find the side length. You got squared, so you just take the square root. Again, that's a one-step process. Now, when you're looking at the surface area, this is actually the only one that's going to be a two-step process to find the side length, because it gives me the total area of 6 squares. First, I have to find the area of 1 square by dividing by 6, but then I take the square root to find the length of a side. Then finally, volume is with units cubed. So again, it is only one step, but I have to remember that since it's given to me in units cubed, I take the cubed root and not the square root. So your homework tonight is going to be to look right here and to take this quizzes. Again, the quizzes is only like these first questions. So it's going to give you the side length and ask you for some information. It should be really, really easy. So we'll tackle some more challenging questions tomorrow during our Zoom call. That'll be at 9:15. If you're not there, I will record the Zoom, of course, and put it on Canvas so that you can watch it. But tomorrow's work is going to be extremely particular. So I recommend coming to the Zoom call so you can ask questions. But I also recognize that if you can't make it, you're going to need to watch that video, because it's going to be just like today, some new information. So that'll be it until tomorrow. All right, bye guys.